Taylor Sheridan, Sicario was your first script. So where did the idea for it come from?
I mean, the idea evolved from a few different things, really. It's not one specific thing. I was obviously fascinated with the world and the complexity of it, um, and I was really fascinated with the notion of um, using the military as a mechanism to police. Um, and at the time that I wrote the screenplay, at the height of of sort of the war on the Mexican side of the border, and the Mexican military intervention there between a cartel war that was taking place. At the same time, we're sort of at the height of using our military to police in Iraq and Afghanistan, and and both were going rather poorly, and um, and it was fascinating to me, the similarities, uh, and the consequences, and so I was also shocked at just the carnage of what was taking place on Juarez at that time, and the fact that it was receiving almost no news coverage in America, and I couldn't understand that. It was a little infuriating, and as a result, I wrote a screenplay that I think would force people to have a conversation about it. I hope.
Right. And you had a background as an actor. Was the end goal always to write, or was that something that did the desire for that just kind of evolve over time? Where did it come from?
It evolved over time as I got older, and I worked on this show for a couple of years, and I essentially sort of reached, I was 40 years old, and I was like, you know what, this is about my ceiling. This is all I'm ever going to be, is about 12th banana on a TV show, and it felt very limiting to me creatively, and so I quit and started writing.
Hmm. Well, talk about what your process was like, because I'm sure that a lot of aspiring writers are probably curious what you did, in terms of constructing the script. Or,
I mean, for me, and I think it comes from having been an actor, the most important thing for me um, was really understanding the journey of these characters, and what you know, what arc they would and would not take. And from a construction standpoint, I broke a lot of rules that I'd been, held to for 15, 20 years. Um, I shift the protagonist repeatedly through the script. Matt's character has virtually no arc whatsoever, intentionally, and we know nothing about him. We learn nothing about his life at all. We learn almost nothing about Cate's life, and we learn very little about Alejandro. We see them in this present moment, and really learn about the essence of their character by what they do or don't do. And to me, that was really, um, you know, that was a fascinating thing to explore. From a structural standpoint, this may seem really boring, but to an aspiring screenwriter, it might seem interesting. From a structural standpoint, I wrote it on a 5-act structure, like a Shakespearean tragedy, as
oh,
opposed to the
wow.
3-act structure. Um, uh, so that the climax of the film, so to speak, is that moment on the border. That's the middle of the film, and I wanted to create a sensation that, oh wow, the movie's ending now, and it was only 40 minutes, and really kind of blast an audience's expectation about what could happen next. Um, and so yeah, I just had a lot of with my first script, and this was my first screenplay. I admitted the fact that I did not know all the rules, and therefore I took the liberty to break them all because I didn't really know them.
Mhm. Well, I'm curious to know what some of those earlier drafts were like. You were shifting protagonists around. How did you find what this story would ultimately be about?
Well, I knew from the beginning that what I wanted to do is build a fascination and a sympathy for Alejandro, uh, and I wanted Matt's logic and charm to justify me wanting him to be turned loose. And then when he was, and I go on that journey with him, and I basically leave our protagonist, Cate, and then follow our new protagonist. And we see what our new protagonist does. What we realize is he's actually the antagonist, and it shifts that perspective back to Cate, and we realize she was right all along. And I had never. We've all seen a movie where, the guy goes off and does something, and it's unseen, and then he comes back, but we never go on that journey. We never follow that guy there, and I really wanted to do that. And I wanted to build it in a way that the audience was begging for it, and then hated what they begged for. And so yeah, I knew that I was going to do that when I first sat down, and so it made it very easy. If I know how it ends, and I know what I'm trying to say, then getting there it isn't terribly difficult. What I find terribly difficult is having a world you want to explore and a character you want to follow and no idea where they're going. So for me, I have to know exactly how it ends, and and then I work backwards.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you bring up, one of the striking things about the movie is the way that it blurs the line between good guys and bad guys. What is the right or wrong thing to do? How far are you willing to go in order to accomplish a greater good? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately the point of the film is, does the end justify the means? And is there an end to even consider? There hasn't been to this point. This has been going on for 35 years, and there doesn't seem to be an end. And so if there isn't an end, is controlling it the best option? And then how does one do that? So yeah, it was really playing with the notion of attempting to apply the rule of law to a place where there is none, where it's been abandoned. And when it's abandoned, what are the consequences? And then what are the rules? And so and we see that it's not an abstract argument. It's taking place right now in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, and we have Americans over there dealing with these very decisions as we speak. And I thought, by taking that notion and dropping it, here, it would seem somehow a little clearer as to the dangers of that kind of involvement.
Mm-hmm. And the conflict, the give and take between Emily Blunt's character and Benicio del Toro's character is really very fascinating. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so essentially Alejandro was Cate 15 years ago. He was a federal prosecutor who was by the book, who believed in the rule of law, who tried to combat the architects of the drug trade through legal means, and he was good at it, like she was, and he got too good at it, and the reaction was, these members came and killed his family in a manner with which would change him forever. So when he sees Cate, he sees that innocence that he used to have and understands the toll of it for him, and attempts to protect her and shield her at the same time, perfectly willing to step over her to achieve his goal, which he considers much greater, because he has completely embraced the notion that the end justifies the means. Because if it doesn't, then every casualty up to this point, every loss is futile in his mind. And I think that Cate is drawn obviously to the sensitivity that he shows her, but also the wisdom. He has an understanding of the world beyond anyone else who's in it, and everything he says turns out to be right at the exact right time. And she knows she's seeing something she didn't know existed, as though she's gone down this rabbit hole. And he's her guide. And that's the funny thing, is that Cate is our guide, and Alejandro is hers. And he drags her through hell, and she drags us through it.
Right. I'm sure as an actor, you've gotten a ton of scripts where the characters were not as well thought out as what you're describing right now with the characters you wrote. Was that a consideration that you had in mind while you were writing this?
Uh, First of all, let me clarify. As an actor, I was never accomplished enough to receive a ton of anything screenwriting wise. But I scratched and clawed thousands of auditions where I
Mhm.
read, wildly underdeveloped characters and poorly developed characters. Yeah, a lot of bad scripts, a lot of bad scripts.
Mhm.
And when I sat down, yeah, I as a result, I tried to make every single character interesting because I understand what it's like to play one that isn't. So I tried to make them all interesting, from the smallest to obviously Cate and Alejandro, and do things, that I learned as an actor are extremely, difficult to do. It's very hard to be believable as an actor, spewing exposition. And so, as a result of having to do that for a decade and a half, there's almost no exposition in my screenplays whatsoever. And what exposition there is comes through the camera, because I'm so allergic to having to say it. So I don't want anyone else to have to say it either. So yeah, I think it was acting was a very good education in screenwriting for me.
Mhm. Let's talk a bit about that camera that you brought up because I think it's sort of undervalued in writing the importance of writing sequences that are based solely on action, where there's not a lot of dialogue. So, can you talk about some of the difficulties of writing these long passages in the film that are based in action and making things like that pop off the page so they'll appeal to a director?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at some of the most moving scenes I've witnessed in film, um, and strangely, especially as an actor, a former actor, and a lover of acting, and actors, a lot of them don't involve any dialogue whatsoever. A lot of times, they don't involve uh, even an individual that you can, pick out and see. One of the most influential scenes on me ever in a film was, the bank shootout in Heat.
Mm.
Um, and my border crossing in Juarez is my homage to that, with a much different result. But I was just so stunned and so taken with the authenticity of that, and the perspective and the realism, and the way that he built tension for 15 minutes prior to that. And I just thought it was, sheer filmmaking perfection. And I learned a tremendous amount about uh, unfolding tension through action, by watching that in a lot of Michael Mann's films. I'm a huge Michael Mann-ophile.
Mhm.
Um, and, uh, and, and so, yeah, I try to do the same thing. And it's exciting when you're writing a scene that starts to feel locomotive. Um, and, uh, and they usually involve very little dialogue. And it doesn't take a lot or not dialogue, words. It doesn't take a lot of description to explain the tension. It just starts to kind of unfold. An agent told me a long time ago, I can tell if a screenplay is good or bad by just looking at the pages. If I see a lot of white, it's probably good. Um, and I didn't really know what he meant when he first said it, and I thought about it, and it's like, oh, it's because the guy wasn't trying to explain to himself in the stage directions what's happening. He knows what's happening, and he was very concise in his explanation, in the screenplay. And um, and so, yeah, I think, as a screenwriter, we have to endeavor to find, it's a visual art, and we need to explain our shots, and we need to explain the tone of that shot when we see it and convey that, and it makes everyone's job easier because we're all on the same page. Um, and so I try to put a lot of emotion in my stage directions.
Mhm. And when the director Denis Villeneuve came aboard, what was that collaboration like? What did he give you as a director that helped maybe deepen the screenplay, or what was that? What was that like?
I mean, he's a brilliant, brilliant man, and a very intuitive, director, an emotional director. And it's funny, he's someone who, so abhors violence, and yet, the way that he, deals with his hatred of it is to explore it so explicitly. And he was a real shepherd of the script. He was a real protector of it, and you know, the script that he shot is largely the script that I wrote, and the changes that came out were based on practical locations that, you know, we couldn't afford the amount of time it took to do this. We had to find a way to condense it. There were times he was able to do that, you know, without adjustments to the script or by omitting this piece. And then there were times where we had to roll up our sleeves and rewrite it. But it wasn't a difficult process. He was extremely collaborative and giving. He's exactly what if you've seen him interviewed, he's that 100%. He's that gracious. He's that kind. He's a true artist.
Mm-hmm. So now that you've sold your first screenplay and had it produced into a movie, which is no small feat, where do you see yourself going next as a writer?
Well, you know, the funny thing about Sicario is it's the first screenplay I wrote, but it's the last one to sell. I had sold others first,
Oh, wow.
and I think that that's kind of what started to garner, you know, some trust that allowed this one. And somehow they put it together so quickly that they were able to get it out before the other ones and even started filming.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones were moving much more at the pace Hollywood is used to. But Sicario went from literally from Denis reading it to us talking today is a span of less than 2 years.
Wow.
Which in movie making terms is a weekend. It's just overnight. It's incredible. It's incredible. So you know, I'm currently working on rewriting a few different things that I've done for various directors, and I have a series at HBO that hopefully will start shooting here quite quickly. We're finishing up that script, and yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Not a problem. Thank you again.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.